So the nature of entrepreneurship is self-leadership. And so part of that, a huge part of that, is carrying yourself through uncertainty and the unknown. And that starts on day one. So you aren't going to know how it's all going to work out. You don't need to see the entire staircase to take the first step. You can drive across the country in dark with just your headlights lighting 20 feet in front of you. And that really, quit waiting to feel ready. You're never going to feel ready. Just start somewhere.
Welcome back again to another episode of the Confident Mompreneur Podcast, where we talk to real women from around the globe about real life difficulties and triumphs in momhood, business, relationships, health, and more. I'm your host, Kyrie, ready to give you real actionable advice to help you become the best, most confident version of you in all areas of your life. Let's get into it. Welcome on today, Emilie. I am so excited to have you here. We were just chatting before we hopped on that we've been social media friends for a little bit now, and I just adore her. So I am so excited to have this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. So we were chatting a little bit beforehand about all of the things that she does, and she's actually traveling at the moment in a hotel. So we were like discussing whether we were gonna postpone or just go with it, and we decided we're just gonna go with it. Which I feel like is the sum of being a mompreneur and trying to do all of the things all of the time.
Yes, for sure. It's truly like the best, I think it's like the best job in the whole world, being able to be there for your family, but also build something of your own and be your own boss, create your own schedule. I mean, I really think it is the dream for most moms who have that desire.
Yeah, I really think so too, which is why I think like having these conversations and showing, that it is possible to build it in a good and sustainable way where we can, have that freedom to be with our kids and do all of the things and run successful businesses and, just kind of be everything that we want to be. Important. So tell me a little bit more about you, what you do, who you are, all the things.
Yes. So I am a spiritual and success coach for the woman who wants it all, but has been trying to get it in ways that just aren't sustainable, who knows that something is missing, but she's just not sure what or where to begin, and she's ready for a better way. I started my business about 5 years ago with the intention. I had been a stay-at-home mom for 12 years, and I thought motherhood alone was going to be everything for me. I quit my corporate job, and after being home with 4 babies for 12 years, I learned that I wanted so much more, that what I thought was the pinnacle of everything I wanted just wasn't enough. And with that followed a lot of shame and guilt and uncertainty about now what. So it kind of kicked off a few-year journey of finding what I really wanted. And I decided to start a blog. And as we were just discussing, when you take that first step, kind of the next step reveals itself. So after I started the blog, I threw myself into becoming a coach, and I was going to help moms out of guilt and overwhelm. And over the last 5 years, that business has really grown and evolved. I've worked with women who are wanting to figure out their purpose, and then women entrepreneurs to grow their businesses, and have really just developed and deepened the way that I love to support and help women ultimately find their path towards their best life. And that's really what I'm focused on doing now, is helping women learn to trust themselves and to lead themselves and to have the courage to do it on their terms.
I love that so much. And that resonates so much with everything that I speak on too, which is why I think that we just adore each other and
Yeah, for sure.
support each other so much. I think you said a few really good things there. It's definitely interesting. I wasn't a stay-at-home mom for very long, but I have met a lot of stay-at-home moms that have been in it for a long time and realized that they want more. And like you said, that guilt and shame can be so overwhelming, especially because I think when you build something up in your head, and you get there and you realize like, I love it, but it's not enough, that can be so disheartening. And, especially when you poured 12 years into being a stay-at-home mom, what was that like for you trying to like work through those feelings of like, I
Hmm.
love my kids and I love being a stay-at-home mom, but I also want more. And like, what did that look like for you as you kind of worked through those feelings and started going into coaching
Yeah.
and the things?
Well, I've really done a lot of kind of dissecting and looking back and analyzing and trying to understand the journey because it has allowed me to really help other women in it. And for me, and I know a lot of women, we're really sold this idea of what motherhood is supposed to be like. We're kind of groomed from the time we're little girls to believe our whole purpose for existing is to be mothers. And there's this implicit, implied message that it is our highest purpose, it is our most valuable. And therefore, if we say yes to this calling of being a mother and especially being a stay at home mother, then basically we are going to be the happiest. It's like the best thing ever. It's going to fulfill us in all of these ways. And so when I quit my corporate job and started staying home, of course, like new motherhood hits you in the face, right? But then after, one baby, two babies, and realizing, well, as you said, of course, I love my kids, but this was not satisfying me in that way. It was not what I thought it should be. And so what do we do when we have those feelings is we make ourselves wrong. Like something is wrong with me. I am a terrible human. I am not a good mother. I am ungrateful and I should be so thankful that I get to be a stay-at-home mom because many
Mm.
women want to and can't, and all of these sorts of self-deprecating rather than accepting and acknowledging that our feelings are powerful indicators of what we want and what is meant for us, we make ourselves wrong. So the first, there was many years of just feeling really shitty about myself, feeling really bad. And I'll never forget Glennon Doyle, who now a lot of people are very familiar with, but at the time, like she was just a blogger. She hadn't written a book. She hadn't married a soccer star. Like she was a very kind of ordinary mom. And I remember finding her blog, and she had written a blog post that had gone viral called Don't Carpe Diem. And that blog post was basically about the first time that I'd ever seen a woman say, motherhood is hard, not because you're doing it wrong, but because it's hard. And that sliver of light
Mhm.
to see someone acknowledging what I was feeling. And I remember her talking about how you can be simultaneously bored out of your mind and overwhelmed at the same time. Those feelings, those complicated feelings that I had never heard anyone talk on, knowing I wasn't alone, that was the start of, I think you only need a crack to let the light in. And that was the crack that I needed to think, well, maybe it's not me. Maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I'm not a horrible person. And that was sort of what had kickstarted my own journey of finding other voices and other accounts and people that, and reading books that started to expand my understanding of what was happening. And so that was really the catalyst. And then as I had worked through my own version of that, I wanted to share that with other moms. I wanted to take and alchemize my experience and the people that had inspired me and helped me and give that to other women. And I've always been a writer. I did a lot of that professionally. And so I thought a blog felt like the easiest way, low investment, can do it in the pockets of time. And so that felt like a really easy point of entry for me to start something. And so that was really where I had begun.
How was that first step for you? Because I know for me, like the first step is always like the hardest thing because
Yeah.
it's like you're constantly fighting against yourself while you're trying to make
Oh,
that
yeah.
step.
Well, the thing I liked about the idea of a blog was it felt like a super safe step because there's like minimal financial risk. You don't have to tell anybody. You can kind of experiment and play around. And so I remember going on these walks to get out of my house and get some exercise and just thinking like, what is the blog? What is the name of the blog? What is the title? What is it about? What is what is it? And just for, I swear, probably a year, like trying to figure out what it should be. And my first blog was called Once Upon a Wednesday, and it was about your forget the rules, write your own, and create your own happily ever after. And essentially, it was that our lives begin once upon a Wednesday, not at the end of some majestic accomplishments or achievements, but right now in your ordinary life, in your middle of your kitchen, in your messy house, right now and today, and really how we have to begin here. And then when I kind of had clarity on what I wanted, I made a commitment to writing every single morning that I knew that I needed to start the practice of content creation. I knew that if I was going to do this, and this is definitely the kind of person I am, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And so before I said I was going to do it, I was like, can I commit to doing this? And so I kind of experimented with, I remember getting 4:30 in the morning. It was pitch dark before my kids got up, and just writing and writing and writing and trying to find my voice and trying to make these posts. And my very first blog posts are still on my blog today, if you go back. And it's funny to see how my style and voice has evolved and changed. Those first few posts were really about me, like quoting a lot of other people and trying to like sound smart instead of just, writing from my heart.
Yeah.
But yeah, that part. And I remember, like, so my husband is in IT, and so he helped me get a WordPress site up. And I spent a year learning how to become a web developer because I was like, if I'm gonna do this,
you needed to, yeah.
that's exactly. And then I was like, oh, I need a mailing list. And I knew that like I wanted to monetize it at some point. So I was like, okay, well, I have to have a freebie. And so I think I spent a good year just getting my head around kind of, not that any of that was necessary, but it felt like I wanted everything, all my ducks in a row. So I definitely spent a ton of time kind of dragging my feet on all of that, writing, creating, tinkering with fonts and logos and Photoshop and all of these things, maybe building up the courage. And I'll never forget like the day that I published the first blog post and then shared it with my Facebook friends and family. I have a journal entry that I still look back on because it was Halloween of 2018. And every Halloween I kind of revisit it because it's like, I am so terrified. Who am I? Who am I to have an opinion? Who am I? Like, there was so much imposter syndrome of like, why would anyone listen to me? And it's hysterical now to think about. Now I'm telling people what to do left and right and all this. But I was so scared to just have a voice, which I think is very indicative of how women feel in general. Like, who am I to ask people to pay me, to have an opinion, to show up, to sell something, to create something, to think I have something of value? We're so afraid. So that part was definitely the hardest for sure. Like I said, I always kind of say it took me over a year to get the blog off the ground. And then within 3 months of starting the blog, I decided to start a coaching business. And that was much faster. Momentum builds for sure.
Yes, it does. I think it's so interesting that you talk about all of that though, about how you feel like an imposter going in, like, who am I to, be talking about this stuff when I'm figuring it out myself. And I actually did this post not too long ago about just that thing. I think especially as women, we feel this way. It's like, who am I to talk on this when I'm going through it myself? My relationship's not perfect. I can't talk about relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's real. And people like real. People like true. But we spend so much time like in our own heads building it up and thinking that we have to be perfect before we jump into something. And it's so funny, like you said, once you get over that initial step and you put something out there, that momentum builds so quickly.
It does.
And you realize like how easy it can be to actually put yourself out there, and that the whole world is not going to come crumbling down around you when you put it out there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and I don't know if this is like good news or bad, but I think this is great news, but it might be scary for people in the beginning who are thinking about this journey. But I always said, I thought I was building a business and I was actually building myself, because what I had a vision that was, so scary to admit out loud, that I wanted to be a successful entrepreneur and I wanted to make millions of dollars and I wanted to do all of these things that felt, audacious and ridiculous.
Right.
But the reality, the harsh truth of this is that woman who has the life that I want, or the business I want, or the success that I want, she's a different woman than I am. She knows some things I on day one didn't know. So in starting, we're all obsessed with, getting the clients and getting the money and growing the business. And that's really, really important. Don't get me wrong. But what's more important is, how are you growing to become the woman capable of carrying and executing and holding your dream? Because the woman who is running a successful coaching business and hosting in-person retreats and doing the things that I'm doing now, she has way more confidence. She has way more ability to hold herself through uncertainty and doubt. She has way more faith in the unseen. Things that on day one that were terrifying is like 9 a.m. on a Tuesday now, right? So we have to grow into that woman. But the paradox is, we can't until we start. Words don't teach. They open the door to us, but our growth happens in action, in
Mm-hmm.
failure, in I teach women to use their emotions as our navigational system and to find their intuition and to trust themselves and lead themselves. And we're taught the opposite. Back to what you had talked about earlier about feeling like we have to be perfect. That is sort of the message that we receive. And perfectionism is just simply a form of fear. We think that we will not be accepted, loved, successful unless we are perfect, because that's kind of what we've been groomed to believe. So it's not that we're crazy for thinking this. This has kind of been our model. And it's not until we learn to know that we don't have to be perfect. In fact, we'll be more successful when we're authentic and when we're real and when we're messy. Think about the people that we revere as a society. Think of the Lady Gagas, and they would say Freddie Mercury. I have a Freddie Mercury like prayer candle that I love. And the David Bowies, and like then I joke about how I'm dating myself with these old examples, but the quirkiest, weirdest, most different, imperfect people are the ones that we just want to look at. We don't want to look at more of the vanilla basic bitches. We want people that make us feel alive. And those people don't follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I literally am just creating a post on this right now. Everyone says, well, be yourself, be authentic, all of these things. And yet the biggest reason women don't, in my experience, is that they don't know how to hold themselves through the discomfort of not being who the world wants them to be, of having other people be uncomfortable in their presence or their success or their shining. And until we learn how to hold ourselves and become that sort of stronger woman, and by stronger, I don't mean tougher and more resilient. I mean more.
So we're still soft.
It's still soft.
Yeah.
It is a toughness and a resilience, but not in this sort of gripped way that we tend to think of it. And that can only be learned in the trenches. I know you love fitness, you love lifting, as do I. And I love fitness as the perfect example of strength grows in increments. And you got to go to the gym. You got to go to the gym. You got to get stronger. And if you try to carry something, whether it's an emotion, a business, an abundance, before you're strong enough, it will crush you.
Mm-hmm. And
we get caught up in the money and the outcomes and the success without the inner work. And I think that's why so many women, the percentages of female-owned businesses that cross six figures, it's like 5% or something. It's like so ridiculously low. And I really think it's because we are not taught this work, the inner growth work that we need to survive in that world and to keep going. And we think I'm not perfect, I'm not good enough, and we go home. And that's a travesty.
Yeah, it really is. I love that you talk about all of the things that we have to learn and like build within ourselves, but it also requires letting go of a lot of things too. And I think people forget that too. Like you can't be that same person. You can't hold on to the same values that person from 2 years ago, held, or the beliefs that they held, or even sometimes the people or businesses that you were in at that time. I know you and I were kind of talking before we jumped on here that, we have both built and lost businesses over the course of our, success, and that each of those, what could be considered failures for other people looking onwards have actually continued to lead us in an upward trajectory because we're using those skills and tools and lessons that we learned in that failure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Truly, I think the bulk of the work that I do now with women is helping them let go of identities, stories, beliefs, attachments, versions of themselves that were never really authentic to begin with, but they didn't know who they were. The ideas about failure and success, like we are so governed by those things that hold us down. And that's sort of the beautiful and challenging part of helping a woman really find herself and her spark and her fire, is that we think, because we're so used to being in masculine action versus feminine being, we think we have to go like find ourselves and make ourselves into something, and like all of this sort of outward projected energy, when in reality we're like a cork in the water that just naturally floats. Like our natural state is intuition and feelings and lightness and play and creativity and imagination and all of these incredible necessary things that help us in our businesses and in our lives. But we have buried them under the world's expectations and our insecurities and all these rules that we think are necessary that are complete bullshit. And when we remove those, our ascension is sort of guaranteed. And so it's a little bit of the opposite. I always say, like, that we're taught the path to success is like hard work over time equals results. And so it's very much about kind of knuckling down and doing the work. And don't get me wrong, I mean, there's work to be done. But Marianne Williamson says the problem is women have been doing without knowing for too long. And I think that's the root of the problem, is we just jump into action, jump into doing, and we don't even know who we are, and we don't even know what we want, and we don't even know what we care about, and we don't even know how to trust ourselves. And we think that more action will save us, and all it does is burn us out, and we wonder why we're burned out and no closer to our goals. Or we, even worse, we get everything we want, as was the case with me with being a stay-at-home mom. Everything I ever wanted, and I wasn't happy. I work with so many corporate women and entrepreneur women who get the dream and they're like, I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. How do I sustain this? I thought when I arrived, there would be trumpets and champagne, and then I put my feet up and finally relax. And the truth is, if you can't enjoy yourself and the creation of it, you will not enjoy when you get there. You can't. But that flies counter to this idea of success that we're sold. It's the American dream. Just suffer hard enough, work hard enough, and someday it will be yours. And that is completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
Completely.
No. I think you and it's so interesting to see, because like for me, I had been trying to force myself, into this business and trajectory of growth and success that I had wanted for years. And then I kind of let go of everything. I stopped my social media entirely for almost a year. And then when I came back, I have just let it be more natural, going with my natural flow, listening to my intuition more, playing more. Like, you'll see me all the time. I'm like traveling and, like just living life instead of chasing success. And the success has just naturally found me over the last year. It's been one of the most successful years I've seen. And I'm like just hanging out, playing, enjoying time with my family, like going on trips, doing all of this stuff that I never would have, done until I had reached that peak before.
And that's a perfect example of how the feminine is meant to thrive. We are magnetic and we are playful and we are joyous and we are meant to receive. We are not meant to hustle and work and grind and beat ourselves into the ground, but we don't feel worthy of the things until we've done our work, right? How many of us can sit down with dishes in the sink or clothes to be folded and truly rest and relax without that voice, that mean inner critic saying, you shouldn't be doing this, you need to get that done, you're being lazy? We don't feel good listening to ourselves. And truly, I always say, peace, money doesn't bring peace, but peace brings money. Joy, the better I feel, the more money I make. Like, these are principles, guiding principles in my business that feel kind of fun and exciting, but have taken years of deep inner work to actually embody and believe. And because, to your point, it takes a lot of courage to say, I am done. And if this means I fail, so be it. If this means I never have another client, so be it. We reach this moment where we're just like, I can't do this anymore. And that moment is not giving up. For some women it is. And this is where I want to maybe shift. It's not a moment to give up. It's a moment to give over, to say, I can't do it on my own in this way. I can't do it by continually abandoning myself. I can't do it by living for other people, buying into this lie that, someday it'll all be worth it. It's all worth it in that it's all adding up in your favor. But so many women just make it mean they're not worthy, they're not good enough. And it breaks my heart. I mean, it truly, truly breaks my heart. And one of the things I wanted to circle back that you had said about letting go of things and people and beliefs, I think that's the other part that is so tricky and hard for women, is because we are perpetually codependent on other people's approval. to feel okay about ourselves. And I literally was like reaching for my phone when you were talking, because just today I saw this quote from JB Copeland. I don't know if you follow him. He's incredible, but he said, I had to lose you to find me. And I was like, oh, we have to be willing to let go of the familiar, the comfortable, the people that we could talk about that all day long, to find our truest self. And as long as we're auditioning and performing and worrying about other people's feelings and making sure that they understand us, making sure they're comfortable, we are never going to be able to find ourselves, lead ourselves, trust ourselves, or achieve. Because I mean, think about success, right? It is our best life. But if you had to lose yourself to get there, you won't even be there to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so willing to give ourselves away for that. And it's no.
And is it yours like idea of success that you're chasing, or everybody else's idea of
right? And that was what
chasing?
we don't even know. I mean, I know for me, I considered myself a strong, independent, successful woman long before I had kids. Like, I put myself through college, I worked 3 jobs, I was strong, and I knew who I was. So I thought. And that was kind of the kicker, was like when people talked about finding yourself and trusting yourself and self-love, I'm like, I got that down. I'm like, I know who I am. I never felt lost. But what I had come to realize is I was just really, really good at buying what I was sold. I never slowed down enough to even consider another way. I never thought, is this what I really want? I didn't spend my formative years playing around, experimenting with identities, figuring out who I was and what I wanted. I just was like, give me the next success. I got to go to college. I got to get out of college. I got to get a job. I got to get married. Like, I was like, check
off that check
off the box. Yeah. and that's the thing, is I meet so many women. They're like, I don't even know who I am. I'm 40 years old and I don't even know who I am. I thought I did, but there's a lot of clues that you don't know who you are. And it's a little scary, but it's also extremely exciting if you have the courage to keep peeling back those layers.
Yeah.
Because the other piece of that is, again, with this perfectionism and people pleasing, when we admit to ourselves, and this can be a really hard pill to swallow, but it is such a liberating one, that who we think we are at our core is, because who we are at our core, she is not perfect. She is all of the things we're, quote, not supposed to be. And that terrifies us. And more women need to embody imperfection, the wholeness of what it means to be a human, a woman, not just this shiny social media version that we think people want to see, because that is where the good stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
But we're so scared. Well, who I am is bad, not good, naughty, and I have to hide her. And that's why we're so obsessed with being perfect, is because we're afraid that if the people see us as we really are, they won't love us. Mm-hmm. Our desire to belong is so incredibly strong that we will happily abandon ourselves to belong. And so this is a cycle we have to begin breaking, but it takes a lot of courage.
It really
liberating.
Does.
It's the best thing in the world, but it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that I always say is like, vulnerability creates connection. So
absolutely.
So sharing those like deep, dirty parts of ourselves, helps us connect better to other people that like see that within themselves too, and have been maybe holding shame over those things. I think one of the things that you said too brought up some things for me of like, we're always constantly changing and evolving too. So the person that we are today is not going to be the same person that we are tomorrow. So you may have known yourself pretty well, right, in college, and felt that security in who you are, but that's totally different than like a 40-year-old version of yourself. You gained so much new experiences, been through, some hard things that have shifted your entire mindset around life and what it looks like for you.
Yeah, that's so incredibly true. I think they can't see my hands, but if I'm holding my hands like 3 inches or so apart, like I think when we're younger, our worldview is pretty narrow, right? And so within the parameters of those guardrails, of what we see as possible or believe is possible, we feel pretty good about where we are and who we are in our little town and our high school and maybe our college and our family circle and our community. But as we grow up and we start seeing more of the world and learning more, that worldview expands and gets wider and wider and wider. And I think within that, we start feeling a little more invisible, a little more lost, a little more unsure of where we fit, because now it's like we've stepped in, like the game has expanded, and we're usually so caught up in decisions we've already made about our lives, our marriage, our jobs, that we don't stop to like reassess, reevaluate. Now, based on this new information, based on these new ideas, these new things, these new experiences, do I still want this? Do I still choose it? And we kind of have this attitude of like, well, I made my bed, I have to lie in it. Like, I can't change. And that's why I think a lot of marriages end when the kids go off to college, or where people completely end up in jobs that they hate. This idea of, I just am sort of stuck where I'm at. And this is the thing, our inner self, our soul, call it whatever you want, is always speaking to us. And it speaks to us in our emotions, our triggers, our anger, our resentment, our fear, and our desires and longing, our jealousy. All of those things are clues if we're heading in the right direction towards our most individual, happiest life, or the wrong direction. And as we get older and busier, we just sort of accept, we look around and like, every mom is miserable, everybody's stressed out, everybody's marriage stinks, everyone. And we just sort of accept, well, that's the way it is, versus saying, absolutely not. This is my sign that something needs to change, that it's time to have a hard conversation, set a boundary, say no, prioritize myself, leave this job, leave this relationship, do things differently. But we don't think we're allowed to do that, right? Because it might make other people unhappy, or it might upset the status quo. And so we end up, I think, really going kind of one of two paths, maybe three paths. We hear the call, we honor the call, we reach the moment. And that's why I think 40s are so magical, is where we reach the moment where we're like, no more, I will not continue, I will listen. Or we completely ignore, deny, and accept that life is going to be far less than we hoped it would. And we sort of just hunker down and sort of just settle for less than who we are meant to be and what we're meant to have. And because it feels like it's our fault and it's just the way it is, and we just sort of acquiesce. And so I really do think there is a moment where we have to pick a path, the road less traveled, choose you, or the road most traveled, which is sort of just accept.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not going down that road.
Well, and it's so funny that you say that, because literally the words that you chose are words that I said to myself. So it's funny, looking back on old versions of yourself, like you said, like looking back through those old journal entries, how much like you've changed over that time period. So I was reading a note that I had in my phone the other day, and it was basically a journal entry talking about, when I was still married to my abusive ex-spouse. I got married when I was 18. So I reached 25, and they always talk about like, don't get married until you're 25 because of brain development. It's a true thing.
Prefrontal cortex.
So I had been married, for 7 years at that point, and I was miserable. I knew that's not what I wanted. It's not who I wanted to be. I felt stuck because, I was growing and he wasn't, and he didn't like that I was growing. So he was trying to like push me down. And in that journal entry, I talk about, like feeling stuck in it because I built it for myself, right? I chose to get married. I chose to do this. I chose to do that. I did this to myself, so now I'm kind of stuck with it. And so now, 2 years removed from that relationship and those things, it is so crazy to think that I thought that way. But that's what like that constant rewiring of your brain does. Eventually, you forget what it was even like to think like that.
Yeah, you have to stretch to imagine versus being, I mean, that's the power of creating those new neural pathways. That is literally the path of least resistance in our brain, just goes to those old habits, old thoughts, old beliefs that feel real. And they're really not. They're just a story that we keep telling. A story that we keep telling becomes a belief. And then that belief becomes a foundation, and then we build upon a foundation. And if it's not a strong foundation, and this is where, women, a lot of the women I work with have really big, audacious, incredible dreams, which I love. But I would say 99.9% of them, probably 100, are built upon a wobbly foundation, because we all are. And you've got to be willing to take it down to the stuff, to go back and say, if this thing is going to be what I know it can be, I've got to build a strong foundation. It cannot outgrow its original specifications. Like I always say, like I was designed, my original specifications was I was just going to like go to college just to have a degree and then be a stay-at-home mom. And again, there's anything wrong with that. But for me, I want something much different than that now. But I didn't learn how to be that woman. So we had to make some changes. The stories I had were like, stay-at-home mom is the absolute best thing you can do for your children. And if you go to work, not that you're a terrible woman, but like for me, that was like a terrible idea, which I was a quote perfect mom for a good 5 to 7 years. I mean, like breastfed my babies till 14 months and made homemade baby food and read books and took them to all the things that are quote perfect. And I was miserable, and I was simmering with resentment, and I was angry, and I was slamming dishes around. And I'm telling you, I'm a far, far better mother now that I'm not perfect, because our kids want us. They want to feel us. They want to connect with us. They don't care about the things that we're doing that make us look like good moms. They just want to feel a happy mom. And so that was a belief that I had to be like, yeah, you're doing everything right. You're checking all the boxes, and you're a terrible mother, because your children feel your anger. They feel you'll never be the mom you want to be while denying the woman you are. You can't. They become who we are. They don't want you perfect. They just want you happy, like truly. So I had to rewrite that story, right? So there's just so many. I had to build a new foundation to believe that when my daughter says, "Mom, you're working too much," now I do not have guilt. I have zero guilt. I know where my boundaries are. I hold them. Guilt is not. I have moments of reflection, like, am I? And I check in, and I might be like, you know what, I am. I'm gonna slow down a little today. Or you're right, I was distracted and I didn't want to be, and I said I wasn't going to work in the evening, so I should, we have those moments, of course. But when I'm like, no, this is mommy's work time. Just because you don't have school doesn't mean I don't have to work. Like, sorry. And I have no guilt about that. But that was something I had to build. So we really, and I forgot even where we started with this and where, but the new neural pathways, we have to become different versions of ourselves. And here's the part to your point. We're set up to believe that like we need to figure out our career when we're 18. We need to figure out our marriage in our 20s. We need to like make a decision and live with it forever. And anything that deviates from that is somehow considered a failure. That whole belief system's got to go. Everything, including our quote mistakes. I mean, I would say your marriage was a success. I don't know anything about your marriage, but it was a success in that you learned something about yourself. It got you to the next level. It helped you grow and evolve. Just because it ended, because maybe in hindsight you'd make a different choice, doesn't mean it didn't serve a very valuable, important purpose in your life story and development. Why do things we look back and I shouldn't have done this and I shouldn't have that and I made this mistake? Honey, no, it was all perfection. And the more we can see all of it as the perfection of building us and leading us and guiding us, the more comfortable we get with risk, the more easy it is to make decisions, the more fun we have, because we're not so, I remember like I got married at 23, and when we bought our first house, I was like, we need to find our forever house. I need to find a house and stay here and never move again to the day I die. That puts a lot of pressure on the first house, right? Yeah. Like everything was so big. And the older I get, the more experience I get, it's like everything is changeable. Everything is a season, a temporary time, something we can learn from and grow from. And it doesn't mean failure. It's just, we have to be willing to change the vision that we think we're supposed to be, to find our actual one, our actual life.
Yeah. I love that you talk about bringing it down to the foundation though. Like sometimes I always say like it sometimes requires blowing up our entire life to
Mhm.
find what we actually want and to
Yes.
create that magnetism, like we were
Yes.
talking about, to bring in the things that we want. We were talking a little bit earlier before we hopped on. You kind of blew everything up with your social media and restarted from the ground up. Well, why did you do that, and what did that look like for you? What was like your
Mhm.
intentions in doing that?
Yeah, so I started my business 5 years ago and started my social media then. And really, over the last 5 years, my business has evolved and changed. As we had talked about, I thought I kind of wanted to do one thing, and then you start doing it, and you get
Hmm.
information you didn't have, and you learn things you didn't have, and so it has evolved and morphed and changed over the years, as well as me learning about social media and how all of that works. And there was a time where I didn't, when I first started, you had to have the 10,000 followers to get like the up swipe thing. And so I was like obsessed with getting my followers up because I wanted that swipe thing. And so I didn't buy followers, but I did the thing where like you did
The
like
follow for follow
a
thing
follow
or
for follow.
whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You did those little like join the follow train and do this and all this stuff. So over 5 years, I had tried this and tried that and done this and done that. And my message had changed, so my ideal client has changed. So I think somewhere in that 5 years, it got kind of muddled. And I had about 4,000 followers, but my engagement, especially in my stories, was so low. And I was posting good, I mean, I was doing all the things you're supposed to. I was posting good content, showing up, being consistent, all of these things. And out of 4,000 followers, I would have 20 story views. I mean, like so incredibly low. And at the end, so we could go on and on about my last year, 2023 was a bit of another variation of tear down to the studs, because I do think it's iterative. And I took kind of a pause. I had some really inner growth work that I focused on, and came back at the end of last year just with a lot of clarity around what I wanted next in my business. And it looked a lot different than the Instagram that I had made before. I mean, I shouldn't say a lot different, but it was more, it was tighter, it was cleaner, it was more precise. And I just felt like I wanted a fresh start. I wanted fresh energy. And truly, I would rather have 500 followers that really engaged with and enjoyed and were there for my content than ego driven metrics, right? That was, look, it looks better. It makes me look more professional. It says something about me versus, no, I don't need that. And it was an interesting experience to start fresh and to feel in some ways maybe embarrassed, or and then noticing like, nope, I got this. I no, I've been doing this for 5 years. Like I don't need to rely on that anymore in a way that I kind of thought. So it's been really interesting and it's been really fun. I did have a moment yesterday, if we're being totally honest, where I went back and looked at my old Instagram and I was like, why did I leave this? I have such great stuff here. And I want to like pull it all over. And I will certainly repurpose some content and stuff. But yeah, it felt like I needed a fresh start. I needed a
Mhm.
fresh audience. Anybody who was going to follow me, who wanted to, was going to come over. And those who didn't, I don't say I didn't need them, but it's time for us to part ways. And
Mhm.
I think being really intentional with quality over quantity, which is something, especially in the social media world, we don't value enough, or I think we're starting to, but I want to more. So it was scary. It's been about a month, but I'm having a lot of fun. It's ultimately super liberating.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it goes back to so many of the things that we already talked about before, like that definition of success for,
Right.
especially around social media. It's all about the
Mm-hmm.
numbers and the metrics
Yep.
and things, how many followers do you have? But really, like the engagement and creating that magnetism to bring the right people
Yeah.
into you for what you're trying to like grow and build
Mm-hmm.
is ultimately going to be so much more successful for you than
Well, and
what
it
success looked
comes
like on
down
that side.
to like what we said about what are your beliefs? What are your stories? If your belief is, well, only X percentage of people will that follow will buy, and so I need to have X number of followers in order to make X amount of dollars. I mean, I I still have a really small email list. My email list is only about 800, I think, and I mean, I've made over $500,000 over the last 5 years. The numbers don't. My belief is like I don't need math to make money. I need art. I say life by art, not by math. Math is like doing all those metrics. I don't worry about those. I mean, yes, I see what people like, or what thing, I mean, I noticed that. I'm not oblivious to it. And trust me, this has taken work. This wasn't from day one, because again, in the beginning, my proof of who I am is tied to people's opinions, and their likes are basically thumbs up that they like me. And so, yeah, if I think that people like certain things, now I'm starting to create for the likes, starting to create for the attention. And as a business owner, unless you're in the space of being an influencer where likes equals ad revenue, for me, it didn't. Was performing for them like a monkey for the likes, but those were the people that were buying. I have found the people that buy and spend the most money with me and that come back are people who rarely engage with us. They're people who are watching and getting inspired behind the scenes, and maybe they like a few things here and there. So I had to make a new rule, make a new belief system, that the likes are not a measure of my effectiveness at making money and growing a business. And I create content for my ideal client, not the masses. And I create content for me because this is for me. Started this business because I had a voice. I say I have been searching for so many years to try to find my voice online. I forgot I already had one. I already have one. And so it's like trusting that. So that's the other part of this kind of fun experiment of this new social media, is like, it's for me. It's what I want to say. It's for the women I want to work with. And anybody else can come, you can look, you can watch, but I ain't talking to you. And there's the creative juices have never been better, because when we're like, well, I do think, and I was going to say this earlier, I forget what we were talking about. I do think you have to, in some ways, kind of learn and know the rules before you can break them. I'm a big believer in breaking the rules and writing your own. And yet there is value in understanding the basics of copywriting, let's say, for example, and marketing, and talking to your ideal client's pain point. And there's value in knowing those things, and yet knowing them and then intentionally throwing them out the window, I think, is just the most beautiful way to make a really soul-led, heart-centered, creative business that is an expression. For me, it's about an expression of who I am and what I value. Now, not every business is going to fall into that. If you're selling, I don't know, candles, maybe you just want to sell candles. You don't want to change the world. And every woman gets to find that for her. But for me, having a voice, making art, moving a woman to feel something is really valuable to me. And then if because of that, she thinks she wants to come closer and work with me, awesome. But this reboot, this new year is about really, really just understanding that I'm here to make change in the world. And that's enough. And I can build a business on that.
I love that so much. Well, I think everything that you have said is so valuable and so important, but any final piece of advice for that mom out there who's like, I feel the drive to do something more. I don't know what that more looks like, and I don't know how to start in that process.
Yes. Excellent question. So I'll just kind of leave with a few thoughts, a few things. Trust it. That feeling, desire, craving, longing is the language of the soul. So if you're feeling like something is missing, it is. And just start by fully accepting that is real, that is trying to get your attention, and is worth listening to. So that's kind of the first part. The second is your brain, the planner, predictor, hard worker, is going to want to figure everything out before you begin, because we want to see the whole plan. We want to know what we're getting ourselves into. If I knew what I was getting myself into, I would have never started. Right. And yet I'm so glad I did. Right. So, I remember being on the call with my first coach when I was going to join the program to teach me how to become a coach. And I was like, I had 800 questions and all of these things, because I really wanted to make sure. And you just, that desire to want to understand it all and see it all laid out is normal, because think about it. The way that we are with school, and we have a path. We are shown a path to success. You go to school, you get good grades, you do this, you do that, you get a good job.
You get a syllabus ahead of time.
You get a syllabus, right? You know how they're going to grade. You know what I have two high school students, and he's talking about, I got the AP test, and there's this many multiple choice questions, this many questions. And it's you're so used to just studying for the test in life, in generalities. And entrepreneurship requires a whole different set of skills. you are the visionary. You are in charge. You're not performing for a boss or trying to get, just hard work alone is not enough. It is, you can work really hard on all the wrong things. So the nature of entrepreneurship is self-leadership. And so part of that, a huge part of that, is carrying yourself through uncertainty and the unknown. And that starts on day one. So you aren't going to know how it's all going to work out. You don't need to see the entire staircase to take the first step. You can drive across the country in dark with just your headlights lighting 20 feet in front of you. And that really, quit waiting to feel ready. You're never going to feel ready. Just start somewhere, even if it's reading books, if it's following people on social media, if it's journaling every day and getting your idea. Like for me, it was just writing. I just started writing every day. Just start somewhere. And know that then I teach about divine breadcrumbs. So if you think about a breadcrumb forest, like I picture like fairy tale, little kids in the forest, right? There's like one breadcrumb at a time. And then you have to walk to the next breadcrumb. And then you have to walk to the next breadcrumb. And it's a combination of taking action and then waiting, taking action and then waiting. And so you just follow it wherever it leads, up a hill, down a hill, around a curve, and just following the next. And a breadcrumb is your desire, your interest, I want to work with that person. I want to learn about that thing. I want to buy these pair of shoes. I mean, literally things big and small that seem relevant and seem completely irrelevant are all leading you forward. So just start, take that action. The woman you are becoming will catch you on the way down. You are getting everything you need. The universe is conspiring to help you. Trust yourself and never look back. You can't mess it up. Your path is yours. You can't get it wrong.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think that's a great place for us to wrap things up. I just love everything that was said. I appreciate you so much. I'm sure women are going to love this and want to know more about you. So please share where we can find you on social media, what programs you have available, all of the things.
Yes, so you can just follow me at Emilie, Emilie Karun, Karun on Instagram. That's where I'm hanging out most and sharing a bunch of content and rebuilding that audience. You can find me at my website, emiliekarun.com. And for this year, I'm really focusing on long-term mentorship. I have tons of self-study courses and programs and things at a lower price point, but I'm really focusing on women who are in it for the long haul, who want to commit to a year. And I have two tiers of a high-level mastermind where we travel across the country. This is a really high touch, high impact container. And then I have a group that is going to be more of just like a monthly group call and a lot of courses and things you can work through at your own pace. So I have those two ways to work with me, and also again the in-person retreats as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear from all of you.
Perfect. Well, thank you again so much, Emilie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Hey guys, thanks for coming to this week's episode of The Confident Mompreneur. If you loved today's episode, let us know, share to your stories and tag us, send to your friends, give us a rating, all of the things, and make sure to check out our guests and follow them on all of the links that we listed above. If you're looking for me, you can always find me at The Confident Mompreneur, and you can also check it out www.theconfidentpost.com for a blog relating to today's episode. I am so happy you're here, and I hope to see you again next week.